Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar, I'm Jed Morgan, and I haven't made a Rings of Power video in quite some time, really because it has left the general zeitgeist of the fan base and the audience members. A lot of people have forgotten about it, and it's what I always call the Dory effect. These stans and people who say that they love these shows, it's the best thing ever, the best thing since the last thing, soon forget about it and get absorbed with the next consumer product to define their entire personalities off of. And that's what we've seen here. Rings of Power is completely gone from the general zeitgeist, but the viewership numbers for the finale have finally been released, and while they're decent, and I never believed that they wouldn't be great, but they are tracking below House of the Dragon when it comes to growth comparisons. And that's a very interesting thing because House of the Dragon is definitely a better show. I didn't love House of the Dragon. I gave it about a 6 out of 10 overall. I thought it was fine. Some really great episodes, some really bad episodes. Kind of balanced out to be like, yeah, I enjoyed it. I watched it. It was fine. But Rings of Power, I abysmally hated. So out of those two, I'm definitely happy that House of the Dragon is tracking better. And another thing to note is the Game of Thrones franchise had a little bit of a harder start when it came to this prequel series because of how many people hated season 8 of Game of Thrones. It just so destroyed the fan base that a lot of people were not willing to check it in. A lot of people in my own life who aren't really into the culture war side of things were just so put off by season 8 that they still haven't watched House of the Dragon, which is a legitimate perspective. Whereas with Lord of the Rings, the last product that we had was groundbreaking, still phenomenal. The Hobbit was beautiful, and a lot of people still enjoy it, even though it's not quite as good as Lord of the Rings. There was enough positivity in the fan base that people were still wanting to check it out. So there is a little bit of a neat comparison there. But with the tracking upwards with House of the Dragon versus the inverse for Rings of Power shows how the general word of mouth affected these shows. But we have this article here from the AV Club that just kind of has the best headline for it. Neilson says House of the Dragon picked up more streaming momentum than Rings of Power. That is not to say that it got better numbers than Rings of Power. It just grew more from the premiere to its finale, and that's what you want to see. Is definitely there's going to be a lull in the middle, but your big episode should be your premiere and your finale. Your finale should be the biggest of all of them. It should be phenomenal. That's the sign of a healthy show, a healthy season. That's not what happened with Rings of Power. We have Rings of Power's initial premiere numbers for those first 2 episodes. So these numbers are a little bit chicanery because it's 2 episodes that we're comparing to. And that's the problem with a lot of these is it's hard, very, very hard to compare these shows, House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, because of something like that, the 2-episode premiere, and the fact that House of the Dragon aired also on HBO, a traditional cable channel, which does it in views versus minutes like Neilson does for streaming. It's a complicated math process that doesn't actually have a one-to-one. So it's very, very difficult to track these shows, but you can do a comparison of the size in and of those individual tracking methods. But that number for 1.25 billion minutes is incredibly impressive. Not as good as a lot of people initially expected, actually lower than even I predicted, but that's what we got for those first 2 episodes of Rings of Power. In comparison, House of the Dragon got 781 million minutes watched, so it's substantially less, but still very impressive, and this is only a portion of it. This does not include the HBO streaming, HBO actual channel numbers, so it's probably a lot higher. Compatible, and the overall estimates that people have show House of the Dragon doing better overall with its combined viewership, but it's still very, very difficult to do that math. But we have the Neilson ratings for October 10th through the 16th, which saw the finale of both Rings of Power and She-Hulk. Interestingly enough, She-Hulk does not appear on this list at all for its finale. Not a good sign, not a good sign. And House of the Dragon, this was its penultimate episode, so it still had 1 more week to go. But that tracking upwards that they're talking about is really good for House of the Dragon because its penultimate episode, not even its finale episode, which we don't have the numbers for yet, was 960 million minutes watched, and its premiere was 781 million. That is a good progression, showing the sign of a healthy season that had great word of mouth. Whereas the Rings of Power, it lost a lot. That's 1.1 billion minutes watched, 1.25. That's a lot on this type of scale that we're talking about here. It's still very, very impressive. Don't get me wrong, it's still very impressive. But tracking downwards from the premiere to the finale is not a good sign for the health of a series. And it going forward with the word of mouth and all of that, and people have already forgotten about it. It's going to be a long 2 to 3 years before we see a season 2, and by that point a lot of people will have forgotten about it entirely, even the ones who aren't affected by the general Dory mentality. But Rings of Power also has a lot of other interesting news that has come out recently that I haven't talked about. A lot of them are rumors, but this is an actual statement that the showrunners said. They claim that the second season will be canonical after repeatedly lying to fans about the first season. Oh yeah, before the first season came out, it's like, oh, it's super canonical. Tolkien's word was law. We looked at it like the Bible. We were doing one for one. That's what they said the entire time. Season comes out, wasn't like that at all, and they said, no, it's still canonical. You guys are just racist bigots. Now they're admitting, no, I guess season 1 wasn't canonical, but we'll give you guys what you want in season 2. It is just coping on the next level, trying to recoup any sort of fan interest that they can possibly do. But that's not going to work on the people who care about canon. They've already seen what these writers are capable of, how much they disregard the canon. So at this point, there's no building off of season 1 canonically. It is impossible to build a canonical story on the foundation that is season 1 of the Rings of Power. Now, a couple other rumors that came out claim that Rings of Power is going to be entirely rebooted at Amazon after creatively bankrupt first season. I wish this were the case. It's just a lot of money that they put into it that I just don't know if they can. It's kind of like the train is on the tracks and there's no stopping it. It's got to go through all 5 seasons, and it's going to cost a lot of money to reboot it. I don't think this is true. Honestly, this is what I am not really thinking is going to happen. I think they're just going to go full steam ahead, and that's all that they can really do at this point. I would love for it to be rebooted by people who actually care and get Jennifer Salke out of the process entirely, but that is just not something that we've seen in the past with like Game of Thrones, and I just don't see it happening in this case either. And additionally, it looks like the rumor is that Amazon will delay the demotion, not the firing, the demotion of the showrunners to avoid sinking the first season's Emmy odds. This season should not deserve any awards whatsoever, but we know how all these things work. They're corrupt systems that favor ideology above quality of content, so it likely will win a lot. And so hopefully they are just fired outright, but a demotion would be a slight scalp to win for the fans after that abysmal first season. Again, I don't know if I believe this is true, but it is an interesting conversation to be had nonetheless. And finally, it looks like a bunch of people have accused the Rings of Power of intense environmental damage in New Zealand. New Zealand is a beautiful country that should stay untouched, unmarred by a lot of these big corporate things. And Rings of Power, it looks like, was just so devastating to them, just leaving garbage everywhere, actually destroying landscapes. And that's really sad to see, because the original Lord of the Rings movies, they beautified where they could. They were not devastating to the land, even though they built full sets of like Minas Tirith. This pisses me off because of how beautiful New Zealand is, and it comes across as incredibly hypocritical. They come across as these paragons of virtue of environmentalism and left-wing politics, but when it comes to actual practice, they do not practice what they preach. And that's what we've seen time and time again with these woke ideologues in Hollywood. They are all hypocrites to the ninth degree and will never stand by their guns when it actually comes down to the line when things get difficult and things get tough. And that's what I hate most, is a hypocrite. If you're at least consistent in your opinions and you practice what you preach, I can respect your opinion. I may not agree with it, but I can respect your position. I cannot respect them because they are entirely hypocritical in everything that they do. And we'll see if there are any charges brought against them. I doubt it because it's a foreign corporation. I just don't expect them to be asked to come back after this. And perhaps this is part of the reason why they decided to move production to the UK. Maybe it's something like that, but it is an interesting story to follow nonetheless. But overall, those are my thoughts on the recent Rings of Power news. Some interesting stuff with the Neilsons. I'm very happy to see that it tracked downward, even to that degree. And House of the Dragon continues to win. Even though I didn't love it, it does deserve to win over the competition of recent years. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.